Good morning, everyone. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person today. I'd much rather be doing this live, and the whole day sounds very interesting, so I'm sorry if you're missing it. But I'm recording this presentation on lessons learned from the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership for work on the Clyde Marine Plan, which we're hopefully coming to the final parts of. So I'll share screen in a second and show you my slides on lessons learned on the Clyde Marine Plan. The Clyde Marine Planning Partnership was established in 2016. We are an unincorporated association, but with a constitution. And the following year, we received delegated authority from Marine Scotland to develop a regional marine plan for the Clyde. Because of that, we are, or will be, a statutory consultee for pre-application consultations and marine licensing applications. There's about 23 members within the partnership, a wide range of organisations, both national and Clyde-based. This is just a diagram, obviously, of the Clyde Marine region. We take in the islands of the Clyde, Arran, Bute, Cumbrae, all the way down to the middle of Glasgow and slightly beyond, of course, up to the tidal limit, and quite a few sea lochs as well, with their own issues, and the east side of Argyll and Bute, down the Mull of Kintyre, and all the way down to where we abut with the Solway Firth Partnership, and out 12 nautical miles, where we abut with the Northern Irish Marine Planning area. You've just seen an inset there of the Clyde running all the way through Glasgow up to the tidal limit. So the marine planning process is a very tiered, involved process, starting with the condition assessment, state of the Clyde. I'll come back to all these levels through the next slides. Then holding stakeholder workshops to discuss the issues identified in the assessment, and then public engagement to discuss the main issues that have been teased out from the assessments and the workshops, and to raise awareness overall. And then the process of producing a pre-consultation draft plan, and then taking that draft plan out to a non-statutory consultation, but a very important part of the process. And following that, further meetings and workshops to really sort of hammer the plan development into place. And the stage that we're at now of having a draft plan currently with Marine Scotland, and then going into the statutory 12-week public consultation period. Following that, we're not there yet. There's the option to have an independent review, and finally to have a final statutory plan adopted by Scottish ministers. And around all this, there's obviously ongoing communications and engagement, which were all laid out in a statement of public participation that also has to be signed off by ministers and regularly updated. And the associated assessments, again, which I'll go into, which go hand in glove with the plan and are also submitted to Marine Scotland for approval and have to be signed off by the minister. So lessons learned. It would be nice to just be able to talk about developing the plan in itself, but that is just one aspect of the whole process. So the talk will be divided into several sections. First off, establishing the Marine Planning Partnership, no small task in itself. The process of delegating regional marine planning, because of course the Clyde, along with Shetland, was the first region to start this process. Orkney has now joined us. So it was all very new back in 2015 when the process started. Issues of marine licensing, how we relate to that. Completing the state of the environment assessment, which was the sort of the very initial stages, just finding out the condition of the Clyde, for which informs our policies and objectives, and then developing the regional marine plan And again, all those supporting documents that are statutory and have to be submitted along with the plan. So the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership essentially evolved from the first Clyde Forum, which, as I'm sure you all know, is one of several local coastal partnerships around Scotland, which were set up in the early 90s. We're using the focus on first massive integrated coastal zone management project developed by SNH. Back in 2006, the SSMEI was set up, the Scottish Sustainable Marine Environment Initiative, and Clyde was one of the pilot projects for that. And it produced a voluntary marine spatial plan, which has evolved, and a lot of information from that has been evolved and worked on to produce the statutory plan. It's, as with several other coastal partnerships, it's a very big and complex region, 8 local authorities and 1 national park, the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. One of the first issues to overcome was the governance of the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership, given that it does have this local coastal partnership history. It was considered that it was one of the early options was that the Clyde Forum carried on existing as it did, and it would advise a delegate of 10 and under individuals. That was thrown out fairly early because it was considered to be too Quango-like by Marine Scotland. So what became the case was the forum evolved into the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership as the delegate in its entirety. The whole CMPP is the delegate, with the board consisting of public authorities and some elected CMPP members, which is on a elected through a public meeting basis. Those members can change. A steering group made up of the rest of the 23 members, working groups that were set up to produce the plan, and the whole partnership in itself is not an incorporated association. So just to give you an idea of the structure, members, like I said, 23 organisations, all individuals representing organisations under the broad headings of protection and enhancement, recreation and commerce, and obviously the public authorities are included there. So the overall role of members is to drive the marine planning process and contribute on behalf of their organisations. Within all these 23 members, there is a partnership board of 6 to 12 individuals, and their role is to act as individuals not representing their organisations to make the decisions where members cannot agree. And that didn't actually happen very often. You could largely approach some consensus with the members, so the board doesn't actually sit very often. That will change going forward. I'll come back to that. Within the board, 6 permanent positions of public authorities, the local authorities, Clyde Port Operations as a statutory harbour authority. Clyde Plan, you see there, represents the councils within Glasgow. So that was quite good. That's sort of an umbrella organisation to represent a lot of local authorities in one go. And up to 6 positions from other members representing protection, enhancement, recreation, commerce. That's just an infographic of all the members and how they fit into the various criteria of people who should be represented according to the Marine Scotland Act as a delegate. And this is quite interesting in itself, because the Marine Scotland Act specified recreation, protection, enhancement, commerce and public authorities. There wasn't much legal reference to community organisations and community groups, which has in some ways come back to bite us, because of course communities are very interested, they want to be involved, but legally there is no actual requirement to involve them on a partnership. But that's obviously something, especially going into the implementation phase of the plan, that will have to be addressed. And that's currently what we're doing at the moment. We're revising our governance structure to incorporate community groups far more. but in the initial text of the Marine Scotland Act didn't specify that. The closest community representation got to within the Marine Scotland Act was just under the broad heading of recreation. So when establishing it back in the day, back in 2015, we, well, not my predecessors formulated a constitution based on an SCBO template, which you just pull off the web. And the board takes decisions when members cannot reach agreement, like I said, based purely on the objectives of the CMPP and its policies. Because in the constitution we ask for members to be incorporated associations, some organizations couldn't become signatories of the constitution, but individuals from these organizations were able to be members to overcome this issue. There's just something that panned out. So they sit on the membership on the steering group as individuals, even though they come from very specific organizations with very specific issues. We have a separate operational guidance document looking into including the risk register and methods for dealing with conflicts of interest. And obviously, we're going forward. We are, like I say, revising our governance. So we'll probably draft a new, well, we will draft a new constitution, but we'll incorporate operational guidance into that single document, thus removing the need of having two separate documents. It's this legal minutiae that takes a lot of the time in developing the plan. So just first off, lessons learned from the actual establishments. The Clyde Forum was a ready-made basis for a marine planning partnership, but it does represent a very complex region. So it's always been the issue that it's very labor-intensive, very staff resource-intensive. So it is always useful to have more staff than we've got. We are in the enviable position, I suppose, that SNH back in the day, now NatureScot obviously houses the staff, but we need a more permanent solution. NatureScot has sort of said several times over the years that they don't want to be doing this forever, but it has been very, very useful in terms of accessing GIS skills within NatureScot in terms of producing all the maps for the plan. We are unincorporated, so we could have used a even simpler SCBO template than we have. It's important, it has been found to be important to keep the partnership to a manageable size of 20 to 23 individuals. So you do have to ensure that wider engagement with other stakeholders that aren't necessarily members. And like I said, going forward to include operational guidance for the planning partnership in its constitution. So following that, they got to the stage of delegating regional marine planning to the CMPP. That was the responsibility of Marine Scotland to draft and issue the direction, which is the legal document delegating responsibility for plan development. It was in the end delegated to both the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership and the public authority members within that partnership. And it appears that in terms of interpreting the precise text of the Marine Scotland Act, that took some time to delegate, and they came to the compromise that the public authority members could discharge their function as a delegate through sitting on the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership, but that had to be sort of legally, as you might imagine, precisely spelled out, so it was all above board. And also consent from the 11 public authorities was required, which in itself took some time. But overall, the coordination between Marine Scotland, the Clyde Marine Planning Partnership and public authorities has gone well. Everyone does sit down around the table, there's constant communication. But in future, it may be an option to simplify the legislation, which I imagine you easily say that, but that would be a big legal ask, to delegate to the Marine Planning Partnership and the public authorities, rather than that, to just delegate to one singular delegate, the Marine Planning Partnership. One of our major tasks following plan adoption, when that happens, will obviously be responding to marine licenses and marine development applications The CMPP will be a statutory consultee, along with all the other public authorities, relevant public authorities, for marine pre-application consultations and license applications to Clyde. We don't do that yet because we don't have an adopted plan. We do receive all these applications and from the Marine Scotland licensing operations team, and what we do is we circulate that to members, and if necessary we do send off a response saying we will not be responding until the plan is adopted. Once the plan is adopted, it will be all hands to the pump, basically, on keeping on top of these applications. So that will have implications for resources in terms of staff and member time, because the members of the partnership will have to sort of feed into the process. So one takeaway from that, therefore, is that guidance on the role of marine planning partnership, any marine planning partnership, in responding to license applications, especially for the pre-application process, any guidance will be essential. The pre-application process will be very useful in terms of ironing out the kinks of any application, so it's important to get in touch with people like ourselves so we can make suggestions as to how any application could be more in line with the regional marine plan as it will be then. Because we can only ever sort of respond to license applications precisely through the prism of the regional marine plan. When the board makes their decisions, it'll not be on the basis of their individual opinions, but does an application fall in or out of the objectives and policies of the regional marine plan, which is our statutory responsibility to deliver. So following those, setting up the CMPP, getting delegation, getting some sort of input into how the licensing process will work once the plan is adopted, it falls to carry out the state of the environment assessment, which is a statutory duty for any marine planning partnership. It's an assessment on the condition of a Scottish marine region in terms of the significant pressures and human impacts on that region. And in our case, that was carried out over 3 years between 2015 and 2018. We followed at the time a similar structure to Scotland's Marine Atlas, which was obviously produced in 2011. But any assessments going forward will obviously have recourse to the Scottish Marine Assessment of 2020. Following the SSMEI work on voluntary marine spatial planning in the Clyde, one criticism of that was there wasn't much about ecosystem services. That was a long time ago. That finished in 2009, I think. So it was ecosystem services were made a much bigger deal of within the current Clyde assessment. There's a traffic light system similar to the Marine Atlas, varying between sort of many concerns, few concerns, no concerns as to the condition of various aspects of the environment, and sort of an arrow system to say whether conditions were improving or in decline or static. It was a vast job. Lots of resources out there, such as Scotland's Environment Web, Nature Scot reports, Coast is included here, which is the Community around Seabed Trust, contributed a great deal. RSPB, organisations like the RSPB, Wetland Bird Surveys, Marine Conservation Society, the wide MASTS group, Maritime Alliance for Science and Technology in Scotland, which I'm sure you're all aware of, all fed into this big document. It was such a big job for marine planning staff at the time that the productive section, following the chapters of the Marine Atlas, the productive section on socioeconomics, that was contracted out to an external economic consultant. Going forward, for anyone else going down this route, you may well consider a more web-based system. So that can include direct links to the data sources, and that would also keep the assessment itself more concise. If you do produce a final printable document, it's suggested to keep the design element in-house. There was a lengthy delay between 2015 and 2018 of getting the design sorted out because that was externally contracted out. which took much longer than anyone had anticipated. It would be a good idea also to have more direct link between the activities in the productive section in terms of sort of the economics and the industry around the Clyde and the pressures and the impacts in the other sections, and make that spatial where you can. And you must also stress the members and the wider stakeholder universe, that new information and data could be incorporated during plan development, especially if you're making it web-based. It's much more easily updatable. So we finally get to the point of developing a regional marine plan and the supporting documents that have to go with that. First off, we have to prepare a statement of public participation, which maps out the process and milestones for plan development that has to be updated at the end of each stage that you come to. The SPP, the Statement of Public Participation in itself, has to be approved by ministers, and once updated, again approved by ministers. We have a wide-ranging steering group, of course, which in the end established a consensus and a way forward and a draft plan, which is no mean feat. There was some disquiet from other groups who weren't members, who want to be more closely involved. I mentioned the community groups earlier on, and that's something that we're addressing now. The plan was created by holding sectoral working groups, working on issues, policies and objectives for fisheries, agriculture, sports, recreation and tourism, shipping, ports, harbours and ferries, socioeconomics, all the things that you might expect. As well as these working groups, workshops were held on mobile species, in invasive non-native species, marine litter, submarine cables, and on the Clyde, certainly we're in really quite a useful position of having a group called the Clyde 2020, who can identify issues and propose solutions to the factors impacting the Clyde ecosystem. Clyde 2020 was set up before this process started by Richard Lockhead back in 2014, I think, on the back of the Clyde Ecosystem Review from 2012, which painted quite a sort of damning picture of the state of the ecosystem in the Clyde, and Clyde 2020 and its research advisory group was set up to try and get on top of that. Clyde 2020 and its research advisory group is facilitated now by CMPP staff. Other issues such as sea level rise, climate change, cultural heritage, of course, all have to be incorporated, and those stakeholders are taken into account through things like the coastal dynamics team in NatureScot, and cultural heritage, historic environment Scotland. So all of the above, all of these processes produced Clyde level objectives and policy, which is rather the point, to add value to the National Marine Plan, and that greater level of sort of granularity of data, if you like, to make something that is specific to the area and useful. So you got your plan, but you can't just put the plan out to public consultation. The plan has to be assessed under various headings. We produced these following documents. We produced the Partial Business and Regulatory Impact Assessment, a BRIA, which assesses the impact that the policies and the objectives of the plan will have on businesses around the Clyde. We have to stress that it's partial at the moment, because during the full consultation, we will be sending a questionnaire called the Scottish Firms Impact Test to as far wide-ranging a range of businesses as we can, and we will also have to have one-to-one meetings with a set amount of businesses, just to tease out how any policies within the plan could impact positively or negatively on their business. As well as that, we have to carry out the child rights and well-being impact assessment, the equality impact assessment, and an island communities impact assessment. Now, most of these assessments were drafted along with the plan process. So these assessments naturally fed into forming the policies and objectives of the draft plan. At that point, there wasn't any guidance on how to carry out an Island Communities Impact Assessment, because that's a relatively new development following the Islands Act. So that's the last one that was drafted. We did that just a couple of months ago and submitted it to Marine Scotland. Also, we had obviously there's a statutory requirement to produce a habitats regulations assessment, and there's a statutory undertaking to carry out the sustainability appraisal and the strategic environmental assessment with that, which along with the HRA were two very large documents. I can't overstress how involved these documents are to not only to inform the policy and the objectives of the plan, but just in terms of effort and carrying them out themselves. These are still all in draft form. They will go out during the consultation along with the plan before being finalised following comments back from the consultation. The HRA and the sustainability appraisal, like I said, big chunks of work. Some of these other assessments not quite as long and involved, because as part of the process, there's plenty of guidance on Scottish Government websites and templates for carrying out these assessments, and it's not necessarily necessary to go the full hog with this assessment. You can say, based on the policies and the objectives of the plan, a full assessment isn't required, but you have to have evidence for that, and that has to be laid out in a certain way that you can see in the templates and the advice from Scottish Government. But certainly several of these documents are very, very large, involved things. Just before I wrap up, so we've been through all those processes, all those stages. We're currently now at the stage where we've submitted the draft plan. Like I said, we went through the pre-consultation stage, which really did sort of, make lots and lots of sort of positive contributions and changes to the plan as it was. That has been submitted to Marine Scotland. They have come back to us 2 or 3 times since then with various further comments to make, just from Marine Scotland's point of view. They've all been useful and good. So we're at the stage now where we've made the last set of changes to the marine plan, and we're waiting to get approval or comments on all those assessments that were submitted with the plan. Then it will be a question of updating the statement of public participation again, and once the plan is signed off by ministerial approval, we can go out to full public consultation. So at the moment we are waiting for that approval before we can go to full public consultation, which will be a 12-week period. And following that, you'll get into the sort of the top parts of the pyramid. The plan after that would be formally adopted, and then he would become officially a statutory consultee charged with responding to all relevant marine licenses and applications. Again, I'm really sorry I can't be with you today, but any questions anyone has, if you can either give them to Ian to forward on to me, or just get in touch with me directly. Both these emails work because the planning partnership staff are housed within Nature Scot. We have 2 emails. There's further all these assessments. The consultation draft plan is available on our website. Obviously, we can't circulate the draft plan at the moment as it is because it's still with Marine Scotland. But there's plenty of information on our website at clydemarineplan.scot. And I'd just like to thank you again for inviting me to present. And I hope you have a very enjoyable rest of the workshop today. Thank you.